Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel or Facebook wall. And today I want to talk about the basic tenets of Judaism, and kind of so people understand what we believe, and as Jewish people. And one of the main motives, besides teaching my brothers and sisters, in case they just don't know, another motive for putting this video out is so that my Christian friends and people who might come across this video or might share it and stuff, Christian folks will know why Jews as a whole don't accept Jesus as the Mashiach. And because it's just not a random, like, we reject, or whatever. You guys want to accuse Jewish people, we're blind, you're in the dark, and and maybe some goofy off teaching like what Paul says, you are put in the dark on purpose so the Gentiles can be saved. Nope, it's not in at all. Anyway, no, we have legit reasons why Jews do not accept Jesus as the Mashiach, and so hopefully I'll get into that today. And anyway, here's my list. I just wrote on an envelope for just kind of bullet points. One is I want to talk about is the belief in one God. And that's it. One God, nothing more. And then the Torah and the significance of the Torah. And maybe the doctrine of death, like what happens when you die. Guess I don't have in here in the resurrection, but guess I should probably put that down. Is there a pin around here? No pin. Anyway, I'll try to remember that pin on the ground, maybe. Okay, let me go put resurrection. There it is. I see it. I see my pin. But let's put res on there. Resurrection goes together with judgment. Anyway, then last of all, the Mashiach. And or Messiah, or in Christianity be called Christ. And so I guess I need to put a little footnote on there for Messiah, because, when I'm sitting here, I just kind of brainstorm. So, anyway, let me put priest, P-R-I-E-S, priest and kings. Alright, there you go. Anyway, the number one tenet. Let me put Shema on there. Shema. Alright. Anyway, the number one tenet of Judaism is the belief, universal belief of our people, is the belief in one God. Pure 100% monotheism. So, to put it negative, is we don't believe in the Trinity at all. God has no triune nature. And no triune attributes, no triune manifestations, because I say that because depending on which denomination I might have my denominations a little bit wrong, but anyway, like the Catholic Church, and their Apostle Creed, and Apostles' Creed, or God from God, light from light, true God from true God, one being made, something like that. Anyway. Blah, blah, blah. Now, hopefully I'll get into Arius and all that. Arius actually had Paul correct, and the Catholic Church had it wrong. And Arius was condemned, a heretic and all that. Actually, he read John and Paul correct, because Paul taught that Jesus was a heavenly being, not God at all. Just he considered him the Logos, or the craftsman, or kind of like how I explain it to people. Okay, here you have a property. I'm way off track already, but here you have a property owner, and he wants to hire a contractor to build him a shed, a big huge shed for his farm equipment. Okay, God the Father in Christendom with the Trinity. Trinity didn't exist in Paul's mind. It just didn't exist. So there was Father, that was God, and only He is God. Period, period, period. And Jesus, if you go to, I believe it's first or Colossians chapter 1, He is the firstborn of every creature, meaning in Paul's eyes, He was there at the beginning, but He Himself was created. So He was created as the very first, the firstborn of everything. Firstborn of every creature. He actually uses the word creature there. And so, and the firstborn means the first. And Arius even said, well, when you use the Greek word begotten, what does that mean? It means one who came into existence. That's what it means. And so how can Jesus be God? He can't be God. However, He could be like a heavenly host of some sort, like an angel. They were there at the beginning, and according to teaching, so the angels are there at the beginning, but Jesus was the first of all creation, of anything, of everything, according to Christian folklore and legend. So, as John 1 says. Now, John, I think, was a little tainted along the way, to promote Jesus Himself was God, period, versus, because it says Logos there, but then they tainted and Logos was God. That last phrase might be added in there because the Logos in Jewish thought and what was circling around Israel at the time, Logos was not God. He was an agent for God. And He had His blessing, when God created Him, He gave Him the power to create. So He was the only being that was created that had the power to create. And He did it, like I said, like a contractor, to work for the property owner. So kind of like, okay, my name's Marigal. If I say, hey, James over here, or William, can you build me a shed? I want it just like this. I give him the plans, and he does it exactly how I want it, and he does it perfect. And so that's what the doctrine of Paul was, and what John is promoting, okay? Now, Judaism doesn't teach that. Now, it was the demiurge, and Logos was, circling around Israel at the time, somewhere around 50 BCE to 150 AD CE. Okay, just right in there, because Philo talks about it. The scenes talk about that a little bit, but it's not genuine biblical scripture. Okay, and so, some people will point out that, they'll use maybe I think it's Proverbs 8 wisdom, in there, the craftsman, and so they use type of lingo in there, but it's not biblical teaching, it's post-biblical teaching, okay? And so anyway, Paul gets this idea because of this philosophy that's circling around Israel at the time. Jesus is the demiurge or Logos, and so then John, who came after Paul, because John was written later, all the Gospels were written after the temple was destroyed, and Paul was the first author of the New Testament that survives, and anyway, he's the one who promoted this stuff and this demiurge thing. And so anyway, so according to Paul, this demiurge eventually was born. Now, if you go to, a lot of scholars would say, he was born of a woman. Yeah, it does say that. But they ignore, I don't know if they just don't see it, they ignore it or whatever, but Romans chapter 1, verse 3 said, read it for yourself. I can get it right here. Hold on. Let me get it right here. And it says, let's see what it says right here real quick. This is King James. Just got it sitting right here just for this. It says, concerning His Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord, which was made of the seed of David according to the flesh. Well, that word seed there in Greek is basically sperma, and where sperm comes from. And so Paul is claiming Jesus was conceived naturally through the, down the line, David, Solomon, so forth and so forth and so forth. Solomon had a trillion kids, so there's probably a bunch of Davidic sons around. But anyway, so he's basically saying Jesus is a direct descendant through sperm. Excuse me, I'm lost sidetrack there. But Jesus is a direct descendant of David through sperm. And that's what it says. Romans chapter 1, verse 3. The point blank what it says. And can't get around it. So Paul also knew James. He didn't believe in the virgin birth at all. It's clearly right there. And so that's how I see it. And then, and Paul was an ex-Pharisee. He kind of I hope he knows Jewish doctrine a little bit. The Messiah must be an actual son of David. And now a lot of people will say, well, you're not Jewish like your mom's Jewish. Actually, that's a rabbinical teaching. It's not biblical teaching. Biblical teaching has, you can read it all through yourself, as you are a Jew, or you're Jewish, if your father's Jewish. So it's not just like what the rabbis say, it's only tribal affiliation on your father's side. No, you're plain Jewish on your father's side, period. Just like in American customs and any other custom around this globe. Most, 99% of them. So, I like to say, me personally, like when I had my radio show and things like this, I'd say, okay, old rabbinical dude, if the big if, I said this in the synagogue, just kind of, make them think. I said, if you're Jewish only by your mother's side, then all of the kings of Judah are illegitimate. Period. Point blank. Why? Why? Because Rehoboam, he's the dude, after Solomon, the confederacy, or the tribal confederacy, the one tribal monarchy, split. 10 went north and the 2 went south. The Levites and Judah, Levites had the temple. They were kind of everywhere, but the Levites had the temple, but then Judah and I think Benjamin went. And so you had two tribes versus 10. And the Levites occupied the temple. Anyway, what was I going to say? I already forgot what I was going to say. Oh, so Rehoboam was, yes, the son of Solomon, but his mom was an idol-worshipping Ammonitess from Ammon, Jordan. And she was an idol worshiper. And Solomon built high places for that wife. And so according to rabbinical Judaism, the whole monarchy of all of them would be disqualified according to rabbinical Judaism. So people who claim to study ain't studying. So anyway, I totally reject the rabbinical definition of who is a Jew. It's only on your father's side. Period, 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 period. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So Paul believes that Jesus was an actual descendant of King David himself through sperma. So that part's good. And he knew James. Obviously, he had to know something. And, but anyway, that's kind of one of my only defenses of Paul. Other than that, I don't like him. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So Paul believed Jesus was a son of God, an actual son of God, like there's a heavenly family, and so he was Now, what I'd like to know is what Paul believed about the soul or spirit. He doesn't get into it, because I'll give you an example of what I mean. Is in rabbinical Judaism, that is, all souls of whoever will exist. It was created at the beginning, and in due time they're inserted when, upon conception, their spirit's inserted on conception. Now, even though that's not biblical at all, anyway, it's just not mentioned, it's just not there. And but Paul believed Jesus pre-existed, so if it'd work, as far as theory goes of philosophy and whatever, if he pre-existed and people are the spirit is inserted or created upon conception and the flesh is a whole different deal, of this world, then his spirit could be inserted. No big deal, but then you have to deal with the whole thing of him deleting his whole entire memory, starts all over, has to figure out who he is and all that. And so then there's people watching, oh, he knew who he was from the beginning. That's why he at the 12 years old, he's at the temple, Didn't you know I'd be at my father's house? And, anyway, that's, doesn't make clear sense when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Or things like that. And because if he already knew his mission before he came, that totally contradicts Paul's whole theology. But anyway, I'm so sidetracked. Anyway, so why am I saying all this? In Judaism, we believe in one single God, period. There's no tri-nature God. There's no tri-manifestation God. Like I was saying, some denominations of Christendom is like, okay, like the Pentecostal movement. They'll look at the end of Matthew, like in chapter 28, it says, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. He said, well, those are old titles. There's no name there. The name is Jesus. So Jesus is just manifesting. And it's like these people don't seem to read either, because everything they say, contradicts what the book says. It's like they never read it. They just get brainwashed by whoever preachers never looks into it. It says, okay, let's go with that flow. Okay, then if that's the case, Jesus is totally 100% schizophrenic, because the disciple says, teach us how to pray. And he says, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven, blah, blah, blah. Or like, if it says, my message is not my own, but the one who sent me. Okay, he's like schizophrenic or something, and like when he prays in the Garden of Gethsemane, take this cup from me, who's he praying to? He doesn't need to pray like that if he is God in the flesh. So, come on, let's get over it. Or the Father is greater than I. Or the other one of Matthew says, no one knows the day or the hour, not even the Son. I was like, okay, how do you explain that? No, Jesus was, in reality, I'm using my views of who the actual Jesus of history was. Just a Jewish Jew, Orthodox guy, didn't know anything. I think a lot of these things were, I forgot what the word is, but they were put on him after he died. Like Paul claimed he was a pre-existing being. Jesus never believed that. But Paul believed that, and so they put words into Jesus' mouth. Like, it's like Jesus saying, not everyone here will taste death, or die before I come back. And so I don't believe Jesus said stuff like that, and because it doesn't fit like a Jewish rabbi type of guy, and obviously he didn't come back, so not to defend Jesus, but in fact, that whole generation died out. He didn't come, or Paul said, I prefer that, I'm paraphrasing big time, I prefer that no one marry, because I want you to be like me, because the time is short. It's been 2,000 years, man. It's like he ain't coming. It's and there's no proof that he is, this great Messiah figure who they hoped in. He might have been a rabbi, not an official rabbi, but they call him master, head of a sect or a movement. He was maybe kind of zealous, to a certain degree, and but that's hard to question. He flipped over the tables. That might have something to do with him being arrested. I mean, you could almost favor it. And John is different from the other three about the two people that got crucified with him, because in some Gospels, it says they were two thieves on next to him, but in John, I believe, they were people who were doing insurrection type stuff. So it's questionable. It didn't say they favored Jesus necessarily, versus wanting to get Rome out, or maybe they didn't like the Sadducees or something. But anyway, Jesus was X'd out, and I don't believe he personally rose from the dead. He's just, the thing is I asked this on Myth Vision. I asked the question to a scholar, and I said, I don't think James deemed Jesus as the Messiah. I just think he was just kind of was more of a sect leader, a group of people who he taught a certain way how to keep Torah. And so James is doing that, and James was known as a tzedek, means a righteous person, and the Jewish people, the higher ups, the Pharisees and the priests, deemed him as such. And you just don't get the title tzedek in Judaism unless you are Torah observant big time. And so and James obviously took over the sect. We see that in 15, not necessarily in blunt 15, he was there, but in chapter 21, he is the head of the church, and Paul goes to see him, and James is asking Paul when he comes to visit, what's this we're hearing about you, dude? We're hearing rumors that you're telling people not to, to forsake Moses and stop doing the Torah. What is this, these rumors, we know that James didn't know Paul was teaching this stuff. Saved by grace, do it with the law. Paul hasn't been there for 14 years, where you're obligated to go up to Jerusalem 3 times a year during Passover, the Feast of Weeks or Pentecost, and the Tabernacle Feast. Yet Paul never showed up. So how orthodox is he? I mean, he says, in Ephesians, the dividing wall that separated Jews from Gentiles. Paul's off on his doctrine on there, but anyway, it was the Torah, and so Jesus wiped that all out, took it away, and so that dividing wall was not there. So now you're part of the community of Israel, the new Israel, for those who believe in Jesus as the Christ, a new covenant. So Paul is way off the hook because Jewish people have always accepted everybody, period. That is the whole point of the book of Jonah. It's not about a whale swallowing Jonah, excuse me from that. It's about all these people that got converted. The people on the boat, when they tossed Jonah overboard, they all repented. They all believed Jonah's message that, the God of Israel is real, and they deemed him real once the waters calmed down. And then all of Nineveh repented, so come on. So anyway, Paul's like way off. Anyway, but I believe Jesus was more of a sect leader, and the Sadducees were actually known to. Now this is where Bart Ehrman might be a tad bit wrong in his studying, because I go along with him normally, and in this I go along with him too, but when it comes to Jesus, it might be a slightly different thing. And Bart Ehrman says, a lot of times in Rome, when they crucified you, they didn't take you down that day. They didn't care one bit rip about you. They let you hang there and let the birds pluck off your flesh. They didn't care about you. They want to make a example out of you. However, here's the big however. I didn't look too much into it, but I know about it. I don't know if there's much deep into it versus just the generalization, but the Sadducees, the priests, that is, when the Pharisees were kind of getting started or weren't that old yet, the Sadducees crucified 800 Pharisees. Now, according to Jewish law here, you are not allowed to, you're not allowed to hang a dude on a tree as an example overnight. It says right there in the Torah, you have to take him down and bury him before sunset. So, if, not Pilate, but it was literally, the legend is Pilate washed his hands and so forth, and it was the Sadducees or the priests that wanted him crucified. So how much is convoluted in tradition because it was written 40 plus years later, and it's not written by eyewitnesses, as the Gospels were written by people who never knew Jesus, never met him, never heard of him. It's hearsay. A lot of their stuff was invented, putting words in the mouth of Jesus too, because they're trying to promote Jesus was a pre-existing being in John, or this or that, and a lot of things what Matthew says is countering the Paul crowd. I'll give you an example. In Matthew 7, it says, not everybody says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven. And you'll say, didn't we not heal in your name and cast out demons in your name? So it's very clear he is talking to believers there. And he says, depart from me, workers of iniquity, or those who are absent of the law. And the law in Matthew's eyes is the Torah. And that is genuine what the Messiah must teach is the law. Not do away with it, but to obey it and promote it. And that's what you see in Matthew all the time. Like Matthew 23, it says, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All that they bid you to observe, and do. So he's telling his own disciples to obey the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, the scribes and stuff. So he just kind of nitpicked right after. It says, however, don't be hypocrites like them. Make sure you practice what you hear, not just speak it. And anyway. So there's a difference there, and also like let's say Galatians. Galatians is another example of Galatians 5. He's what happens. The background of Galatians, a lot of people, especially Messianics, they try to twist Galatians, but the reality is Paul, according to the context, Paul went to Galatia, converted them to his grace theology. These Gentiles, and they're just they're pagans of some kind, and anyway, they accepted Paul's theology of whatever. But after he left, the James crowd, the Judaizers or the Torah-observant believers, came in and converted them all away from Paul's teaching, and they are now Torah-observant. And Paul starts out with Galatians, who has bewitched you? Who has given you another gospel? Blah, 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 and he started raining down curses on whether angel or man. Let him be accursed, whatever. And then you skip down to chapter 5. It says, if any of you get circumcised at all, you forfeit Jesus. He'll benefit you nothing. He is of no avail for you. There's no benefit for you. So he goes, are you guys trying to be justified the law? Blah, blah, blah. So Paul, and in Philippians, he says, I was a Pharisee. I debate that because his doctrine's way, way off. And he twists things. I'll give you another example of twisting when he's trying to use scripture for his own means to get money in his pocket. He does this stuff. He goes, it is said in the Torah, I'm paraphrasing, it's said in the Torah that do not muzzle an ox while it's treading out the grain. He goes, does God really care about the ox there? Or is he talking about us, those who preach, and get some benefit? I'm like, really? He just threw that whole off, Yeah, God is caring about the ox there. That's what the whole point. Now remember, if Moses actually wrote the law, this is 1,500 years before Paul came around. and we do that. We obey the Torah. And so Paul is just way off, you know. And what's interesting is Paul claims that his doctrine came by revelation. You know, no one taught it to him. Exactly my point. He's a goofball. Anyway, sorry for the blasphemy there, but yeah, he's a goofball. He believed Jesus pre-existed. He is the demiurge. He created everything. It's so anti-Jewish. That's why you're like, dude, that's not even Jewish thinking, dude. It might be this new doctrine that was circling at the time, this philosophy of the demiurge logos, but, you know, go back 100 years, it didn't exist. We didn't believe that way. And just kind of goofy trend that was going on. Anyway, the Gnostics kind of accepted it after and just ran with it after Paul. But anyway, James crowd, seeing, you know, when I said Paul, I mean, James wasn't aware of Paul, of all that. He says, look at all these believers. This is in Acts 21, verse 20, I believe. He says, look how many people that believe him. We're all zealous for the law. And so here it is 25 years later. This is year 58. Jesus died in year 33. And so 25 long years, and James, the very brother, you know, according to like Jewish customs and things like that, you know, when there's a sect or something. Now, granted, this is a lot of modern stuff, what I'm saying, but, you know, things kind of go on that way. Like if a father is known as a good rabbi, the son kind of gets to be that way too. And you can see this in the Mishnah and the Talmud too. And anyway, here you have Jesus. He gets X'd out. Well, look who took his place. Who is head of the church? It was James's brother. And Paul calls him that. That's the brother of the Lord. So anyway, and James does not accept Paul at all, his teaching at all. He obviously, or he would turn his back on the Torah as well, but he doesn't. So anyway. So I hope that kind of some definitions of some Christendom versus Judaism there. But no, we believe in one God only. I'm going to veer off again, but it's going to say there's no triune-natured God, no tri-manifestation God. Now, I talked about the Pentecostals who believe Jesus is the Father and Son and Holy Spirit, and those types of denominations like that. Other one is there's three different personalities or characteristics, but there's still one God. I said, no, that's knocked out too, because when you go to when like Stephen didn't believe in that, you know, or the book of Revelation, they don't believe in that, or like the Gospel of Matthew don't believe in that. And so, and you can't have one aspect of God, you know, it's supposed to be a mystery, and it's like, no, it's false.